The coastal atmosphere of South Australia in the late spring of 1948 was one of burgeoning optimism, yet it remained shadowed by the lingering anxieties of a world recently fractured by global conflict. On the morning of December 1st at approximately 6:30 a.m., this fragile post-war peace was disrupted by a discovery on Somerton Beach, roughly 11 kilometers southwest of Adelaide. Two apprentice jockeys engaged in their early morning routine of exercising horses observed a figure slumped against a seawall across from the crippled children's home. To the casual observer, the man appeared to be resting, perhaps sleeping off the excesses of a warm summer night. He was positioned with his head propped against the concrete wall, legs extended, and feet crossed, a posture of deceptive relaxation that masked a profound medical and historical enigma. The initial visual survey of the scene by Constable John Moss and subsequent responders revealed a man whose appearance was starkly incongruous with his surroundings. He was approximately 40 to 50 years of age, possessing a well-built, broad-shouldered physique and standing 5 feet 11 inches tall. His hair, a gingery brown hue graying at the temples, was brushed back without a part, and his face was clean-shaven, suggesting a man of meticulous personal habits. Most striking, however, was his attire. Despite the sandy environment, he wore a high-quality suit consisting of a white shirt, a red, white, and blue patterned tie, brown trousers, and polished black shoes. Notably, he was missing his hat, an essential accessory for a man of his perceived social standing in 1948, and he carried no wallet or obvious form of identification. The reconstruction of his final hours began with witness testimonies that painted a picture of a man slowly drifting into a lethal stupor. At 7:00 p.m. the previous evening, November 30th, jeweler John Bain Lyons and his wife had observed the man in the same position. They noted he extended his right arm upward before it fell back to the sand, an action they dismissed as the clumsy movement of a drunkard attempting to smoke. Later that evening, Gordon Straps and Olive Neal viewed him between 7:30 p.m. and 8:00 p.m., remarking on his total lack of movement despite the aggressive presence of mosquitoes, a detail that, in hindsight, suggested he was already slipping toward a coma or had already expired. The subsequent medical examination at the Royal Adelaide Hospital placed the time of death at roughly 2 a.m. on December 1st. The physical state of the body offered immediate contradictions. While his exterior was pristine, his interior was ravaged by an unknown force. Pathologist John Dwyer noted that the man's stomach was congested with blood and his spleen was strikingly large, approximately 3 times the normal size. These internal symptoms, combined with the lack of any obvious trauma or struggle, led medical professionals to speculate that he had been the victim of a highly sophisticated, fast-acting poison. The systematic removal of clothing labels was perhaps the most chilling detail. In the mid-20th century, garments were deeply regional. The cut of a lapel or the weave of a fabric could pinpoint a man's city or country of origin. By excising these tags, the Somerton man or his handlers had effectively rendered him a ghost. This tactic, while common in espionage, stood in baffling contrast to his choice of a public beach for his final moments. Was he a man who had sought to disappear, or was he a message intended to be found, albeit one written in a language that the South Australian police could not yet decipher? As 1948 turned to 1949, the investigation into the unknown man expanded into a frantic search for any baggage he might have abandoned upon his arrival in Adelaide. On January 14th, a critical breakthrough occurred at the Adelaide railway station. Cloakroom staff discovered a brown suitcase that had been checked in after 11 a.m. on November 30th, the very day the man appeared on the beach. The suitcase was linked to the body through a small but undeniable forensic thread, a spool of Barber's brand orange waxed thread, identical to the rare thread used to stitch a repair in the secret pocket of the man's trousers. The contents of the suitcase did not clarify the man's identity, rather they deepened the paradox of his existence. While the body on the beach was impeccably groomed, The suitcase contained items that hinted at a life of travel, technical precision, and possibly deception. Investigators found a collection of tools that were not standard for a typical traveler of the era. These included a table knife that had been ground down into a sharp, pointed instrument and a pair of scissors modified to a fine point. Such modifications are often seen in trades involving delicate mechanical work such as instrument making or electrical engineering, a detail that would take 70 years to fully appreciate. The Keen labels were a frustrating lead. Despite extensive international inquiries, no missing person named T. Keen matched the Somerton man's description. The police began to suspect that these labels were left intentionally, a distraction for any authority who might stumble upon the luggage while the owner was in the field. This theory gained weight when it was observed that, just like the clothes on the body, many of the items in the suitcase had their brand labels removed, yet the Keen tags were left clearly visible. Beyond the luggage, the man's own body presented anatomical anomalies that suggested a specialized lifestyle. Taxidermist Paul Lawson, tasked with creating a plaster death mask, and pathologist John Cleveland both remarked on the man's unusual lower body development. His calf muscles were extraordinarily high and pronounced, a physiological trait often observed in individuals who spend significant time on their toes, such as professional ballet dancers or athletes. Furthermore, his feet exhibited a distinct wedge shape, with the toes compressed as if they were habitually forced into high-heeled, pointed footwear. This ballet dancer theory was whispered in the Adelaide press, sparking rumours of a defecting performer or a tragic artist. However, these traits could also indicate a man who had undergone rigorous military training or specialized physical conditioning. The smooth, soft state of his hands, devoid of the calluses typical of manual labor, suggested he was a man who worked with his mind or with delicate tools, rather than in the factories or fields. The medical mystery of his death remained the most spicy element of the case. In 1949, the expert pharmacologist Cedric Stanton Hicks testified that the man's internal congestion was consistent with a dose of a digitalis-like poison, such as strophanthine. These toxins were known to be lethal in small doses and could dissipate from the body so quickly after death that they would be undetectable by the chemical tests available in 1948. This possibility hinted at a professional liquidation, a killing designed to look like a natural heart failure, executed with such precision that it left the authorities powerless to prove a crime had even occurred. The investigation took a turn into the surreal in June 1949 when a final, microscopic search of the Somerton man's clothing yielded the most famous clue in Australian history. Within a small, concealed fob pocket sewn into the waistband of his trousers, investigators found a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper. On the paper was printed the Persian phrase "tamam shud." Public library officials quickly identified the script as the closing words of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of 12th century philosophical poems. The phrase translates to "it is ended" or "it is finished," a poignant and cryptic epitaph for a man without a name. The discovery launched a public appeal to find the book from which the scrap had been torn. Weeks later, a man from the Glenelg area surrendered a rare 1941 edition of the Rubaiyat, claiming he had found it tossed through the open window of his car on the night of November the 30th. Forensic testing confirmed the scrap was an exact match for the final page of this specific volume. The book, however, contained more than just poetry. On the back cover, investigators found faint indentations of 5 lines of handwritten letters, which appeared to be a code and an unlisted telephone number. For decades, the Somerton Man Code resisted all attempts at decryption. Military intelligence experts, university professors, and amateur code breakers analyzed the frequency of the letters, suspecting it was a book cipher where the poem provided the key. Others theorized it was not a code at all but a mnemonic device, perhaps the first letters of a romantic verse, or, as more cynical researchers would later suggest, a list of horses at a local racetrack. The presence of such a cipher, combined with the untraceable poison and the missing labels, solidified the man's reputation as a Cold War spy. The unlisted phone number in the book led the police to a nearby residence in Somerton Park, home to a nurse named Jessica Thompson, who became known to the public as Jestin. Her involvement introduced a layer of intense personal drama and potential espionage. When police showed her the plaster death mask of the Somerton man, Thompson reportedly reacted with such visceral shock that she nearly fainted, yet she adamantly denied knowing him. She did, however, admit to giving a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man named Alf Boxall during the war. Police, believing the mystery was solved, located Boxall in Sydney, only to find him alive and well, still in possession of the book Thompson had given him, intact and without the tamam shud scrap removed. This bizarre twist left the authorities with a haunting reality. The Somerton man was linked to the same woman and the same rare book as Alf Boxall, yet he remained a complete stranger to the official record. The rumours surrounding Jessica Thompson were explosive. Her daughter Kate later claimed her mother was into things the police didn't know about, and suggested that she might have been a Soviet agent who knew some Russian. If Thompson was indeed a handler or a sleeper agent, the Somerton man's death might not have been a suicide or a robbery, but a calculated removal of an asset that had become a liability. The connection between the Somerton man and Jessica Thompson extended beyond the unlisted phone number and the Rubaiyat. In the years following the inquest, a theory gained traction that the relationship between Jestin and the mystery man was not merely professional or political, but deeply personal. Jessica's son Robin, born in July 1947, became the focal point of this speculation. Researchers noted that Robin shared two extremely rare genetic anomalies with the Somerton man: hypodontia, the congenital absence of certain teeth, and a unique ear structure where the upper hollow was larger than the lower. This shared biology led many to believe that the Somerton man had travelled to Adelaide in a desperate attempt to reconnect with a woman he had known during the war, and a son he was not legally permitted to claim. In this narrative, the death on the beach was a tragic suicide, a man finishing his life at the doorstep of the family he could never have. However, this romanticized version of events was haunted by darker possibilities. The George Marshall case of 1945 was particularly eerie. Marshall had died in Sydney, the same city where Jessica Thompson was training as a nurse at the time, with the Rubaiyat as his only companion. The pattern of unidentified men dying with Persian poetry began to look like more than a coincidence. It looked like a signature. Furthermore, the tragedy of the Magnoson family added a layer of local terror. In June 1949, shortly after the Somerton man was buried, a young boy named Clive Magnoson was found dead in a sack near the same beach. His father, Keith, was found unconscious nearby and later claimed he had been trying to identify the Somerton man. His wife, Roma, testified that she was threatened by a masked man who told her to keep out of this or else. These incidents suggested that a very real and very dangerous underworld was operating in the shadows of Adelaide, and the Somerton man was the key they were all trying to hide. Was Jessica Thompson a victim of these forces or a participant? Her daughter recalled that her mother was scared of something, and that she had once said the man's identity was known to a higher level than the police. This higher level was almost certainly the newly formed Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, or the international operatives working under the Venona Project. If the Somerton man was a spy, his choosing to die on a beach within walking distance of his handler's house might have been a final, desperate act of defiance or a silent plea for help that went unanswered. After 7 decades of speculation, the Tamam Shud case was finally brought into the light of modern science. In 2021, the South Australian government authorised the exhumation of the Somerton man from his grave at West Terrace Cemetery. This effort was the culmination of 15 years of work by Professor Derek Abbott of the University of Adelaide, who had become the world's leading expert on the case. Working with the renowned genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, Abbott used hairs captured in the original 1949 plaster death mask to extract a DNA profile. In July 2022, the bombshell announcement was made. The Somerton man finally had a name. He was Carl Charles Webb, a 43-year-old electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. Born in 1905, Webb was a man whose documented life began to explain every mysterious detail of the case in a way that was both shocking and tragically ordinary. The code that had baffled military cryptographers for 70 years was now viewed through the lens of Webb's known addiction to horse racing and betting. Rather than a message to Moscow, the letters were likely a shorthand for the horses Webb intended to bet on at a race meet. His possession of the Rubaiyat was linked to his personal interest in writing poetry, as revealed in archival records discovered by Abbott's team. The most profound revelation, however, concerned his presence in Adelaide. In October 1941, Webb had married Dorothy Jean Robertson. By 1947, the marriage had collapsed due to Webb's reportedly erratic behaviour, and the couple separated. Dorothy had subsequently moved to South Australia to escape him. It is now theorised that Carl Webb, a loner who had become obsessed with finding his estranged wife, had travelled to Adelaide to track her down. The tragedy of the case lies in the realisation that while Webb was searching for Dorothy, he likely found himself alone, broke, and suffering from a failing heart or the effects of a self-administered substance on Somerton Beach. The DNA evidence also brought a definitive end to the hidden child theory. Robin Thompson, the son of the nurse Jessica Thompson, was conclusively proven not to be the son of Carl Webb. The incredible genetic similarities, the ears and the teeth, were nothing more than a statistical fluke that had misled investigators for 74 years. The story of the Somerton man, therefore, is not a grand tale of international intrigue, but a sobering narrative of a man who slipped through the cracks of a society in transition. Carl Webb was a man who took his secrets to the grave, only to have them unravelled by a lock of hair and a digital family tree. While the spiciness of the spy theories has faded into the banality of a domestic tragedy, the case remains a testament to the enduring human need to find meaning in the unknown. The Tamam Shud scrap was not an end to a mission, but a final personal statement from a man who had decided that for him, the world was finished. Even with his identity known, the why of his death still lingers. Why did he remove his labels if he wasn't a spy? Why did he choose that specific spot? And why did Jessica Thompson react so strongly to his face if they truly were strangers? The Somerton man has a name, but the ghost of Carl Webb still haunts the sands of South Australia, a reminder that some parts of a man can never be fully reconstructed, even with the most advanced science at our disposal.